Right, earlier this week we found out the pretty positive news that Scottish football was set to go back to complete normality with the news that red zones had been abolished with immediate effect. As a well-known Celtic podcast put it, that's red zones away. The COVID-19 Joint Response Group, who have been pretty busy over the last 18 months, they comprise members of the SFA and the SPFL, hence the joint bit of that term. They gave the reasoning for why they have done away with red zones at this stage. The key reasons given were that vaccine rates amongst the age range of footballers, so for anything from like 18 to, Craig Gordon's age, vaccine levels in that age group have improved, increased. Also, the fact that mandatory distancing has been removed by the wonderful Scottish Government. And finally, that clubs were keen to admit more home and away supporters. The red zone, quite simply, is the critical area of a stadium. Now, it becomes active 3.5 hours before kick-off, and it's limited, or was limited, only to match day personnel, so players, managers, officials, etc. So this was brought about originally when football returned at the start of last season with no fans at all. Now, this season, when fans returned to Celtic Park, it meant that part of the main stand at Parkhead still had to be cordoned off, basically to separate fans from players. It also affected things like travelling in many buses. Neil Lennon wasn't exactly a fan of that, was he? Training. Also, hospitality inside stadia, Celtic Park for example. Basically now, Scottish football can go back to complete normality, other than the fact Celtic aren't top of the league. The only side so far this season to bring in away support to Celtic Park were Bayer Leverkusen. That's because UEFA rules over red zones and stuff like that aren't quite as strict as the SFA and SPFL ones. In terms of the other teams that have come to Celtic Park, domestically, no team has brought any away supporters. Added to that, Celtic have had fans at Livingston and last weekend at Aberdeen, but we didn't get an allocation for either Tynecastle or Ibrox or any of the European away matches we've played so far. And added to that list yesterday was the upcoming game away to Ferencváros. But Celtic Park will welcome away fans back imminently now, whenever we next play a game at Celtic Park. Although there is one team, one set of supporters that are still causing a bit of discussion amongst the Celtic support. I'll give you a clue. They visit on January the 2nd. That may be one of the longest intros I have ever done on the channel. There's just so much to get through. I've already given my thoughts on the prospect of Rangers having fans at the next derby match. Now, that tweet was 30 minutes after we lost to Ibrox, to be fair. It is fair to say that I was a little bit frustrated at that point. Hopefully be a little bit more reasoned on this video. Before I get into my thoughts, so we just need to clarify a couple of wee things. A quick history lesson and a quick rules update. First of all, the history lesson. Celtic didn't get an allocation for the first derby this season at Ibrox. That was despite Rangers actually printing off and even sending tickets to Celtic before cancelling them. Their reasoning was that they couldn't have any guarantees, funnily enough, over red zones for the January New Year fixture. Celtic were left flabbergasted, that's the quote that was used, and we were told that directly from the club, so we usually like to take them at their word. Now also, before I get into this, and I am expecting a few bites in this video in the comments below, that's natural when you talk about a contentious issue like this, but let's just get the SPFL's rules down on paper or down on video and look at what they actually say. Now, I've gone to section I-27, where it reads, the home club must make provision for the admission of such reasonable number of visiting supporters at every home league match and playoff match as may be agreed in advance with the visiting club. Rules do my nut in, just write it like you would say it. You would never go down the pub and talk like that, so why are you writing it in a rule book? The key bit of that is the word reasonable. In UEFA competition, you may or may not know, they have a 5% rule. So Celtic have to offer up 5% of Celtic Park to any visiting support, 3,000 tickets. There is no such rule in domestic football, well, certainly in league football. I think in the Cup there is. But reasonable is the term that's used there. All we have to do is give a reasonable number of tickets to away supporters. It's very much open to interpretation. 0 isn't a reasonable number. I don't think anyone could really argue that. So my hopes from August the 29th of Celtic not giving a single ticket to Rangers seem dead in the water already. 800 tickets, that's what Celtic were giving Rangers for Parkhead prior to the pandemic. That was clearly reasonable. Why? Because the SPFL allowed it. They gave us a similar allocation for Ibrox. So that's reasonable ballpark, 800 tickets. Is 300 tickets reasonable? Is 84 tickets reasonable? I could sit here and play bingo all day, but I think Celtic have a few options for how they can handle this on July the 2nd. Let's take a look at them. So option 1 is for Celtic to give Rangers an even lower allocation than they did pre-pandemic. So like 300 tickets, 400 tickets, really test the SPFL's resolve, test that definition of the word reasonable. They could, if they wanted, try and give Rangers no tickets at all, but I just don't think that'll wash at all. Second option, Celtic just to go back to the pre-pandemic allocation of 800 tickets. That just seems like the most likely option from where I'm stood. And the third option, which is by far the riskiest, is that a word? Is to give Rangers the 8,000 tickets. We used to get them prior to 2018 when they completely spat the dummy out. Now, that would obviously be on the proviso, fancy word, that they then give us back the broom loan the next time we go to Ibrox. The derby matches for me are one of the best things in life. The atmosphere is amazing. They're the showpiece match of Scottish football. They're arguably one of the biggest matches in world football, and I know there's always a case to talk them up, but they genuinely are, and people look forward to watching them around Europe and around the world. They've not been the same, not been quite as good when you've only had 800 away fans as opposed to 8 or 7,000, and I do think that's something that I'd like to see change again in future. And Celtic have a chance to do this here. Now, the only thing I would throw in there is it totally viable? Now, the reason I say that is that Rangers sold 45,000 season tickets this year, with many of them housed in the broom loan where Celtic fans used to sit. So they quite literally, and not to quote a widely circulated video clip, don't have the capacity. So a huge Celtic support at Ibrox for the next derby there this season probably, certainly isn't a possibility, but I still think this is an opportunity for Celtic and Rangers to get back round the table and sort this. Now, I'm not actually blaming Celtic for this. This was all the Rangers doing, and Celtic just reciprocated the arrangement and gave them a handful of tickets for Celtic Park. But I just think these matches are too good and we need to try and sort this. However, there are many people who think we should go the other route and not give Rangers a single ticket, make it all Celtic supporters. I just think the fixture as a whole suffers, and it's not great when we have to go to Ibrox with no fans at all. The Hamish that was responding just half an hour after the defeat at Ibrox would certainly disagree with the one that's sitting here right now. Whatever happens, it's a huge decision for Celtic, and a lot of people's eyes and ears and mouth and nose are going to be on this decision because it's a big one. It's going to divide people, whatever Celtic do. I just hope they get it right and do what's best for Celtic. Right, that's us for today. International breaks, obviously a bit of a harder time to talk about issues. We're trying to give you as much variation on the channel as possible. We don't just want to keep chatting about Ange and, you know, will he get this right and what about that Aberdeen game. We want to talk about other issues that will get you guys and girls chatting in the comments below. Now, we've got far more varied content coming on the channel before Celtic next play a game. We've got a couple of really good interviews lined up for next week. We'll be doing a kind of video podcast tomorrow. Me and John will be doing that live at lunchtime. So far more to come. We're trying to get to 21,000 subscribers as soon as we can. So if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, please do it. You don't even need to leave the video if you're watching on a laptop or a desktop computer back in the 19th century. Just click that wee bit on the bottom right hand corner of this video. It would be massively appreciated by us all. Thank you and goodbye.